Hey, welcome everybody. So this is an Egin learning and sharing webinar about energy efficiency. And I won't spend much time telling you about those things, but Egin is a programme to help communities in Wales tackle climate change and live more sustainably. We're part of DTA Wales, the Development Trust Association for Wales. And we've got with us today Mike Brain, who's our Net Zero Programme Manager as part of Social Business Wales, which is a programme delivered by many organisations, but we are one of them. And he's also going to talk a little bit about the Energy Action Group, which is also something that, that DTA Wales is part of delivering. And we've also got Dave Gittins, who's the director for Wales for the Severn Wye Energy Agency, and they're one of the partners in delivering Egin. And yeah, if you get support through Egin, which is free as it's funded through the National Lottery Community Fund, one of the things you can actually have is an energy audit for your community building. So Dave will talk a little bit more about that as well. So it would be great if everyone just types in the chat who you are and what organisation you're here with, so we can just have an idea of who's here. That would be nice. And while you do that, I will pass to Mike to get us started.
That's great. Thank you, Gwyneth. And good afternoon, everybody. Can everybody see the screen and the presentation? Wonderful. Excellent. I will get cracking then. What I'm looking to do or hoping to do is to spend about 15 minutes just talking through an approach for and the benefits of monitoring and targeting, essentially, for your energy, fuel, water waste, whatever it might be, and just looking at why we do it, how to do it, what it gives us, and what we can do with that information, and to give you then hopefully an example or two of how it's been applied previously and the benefits that has brought. Following that, Dave, as Gwyneth has just said, from Severn Wye, will then spend about a similar amount of time just outlining some of the no-cost, low-cost, capital cost measures you can consider for looking at energy efficiency, potentially renewable energy, and minimising waste, really, so on your journeys to achieving your net zero aspirations. And following that, pardon me, we're going to spend 20 minutes or so just taking questions, talking through anything that you've got on your mind, any points you want to discuss, be them general or specific, that's fine. And if you want to post anything in the chat as we continue through, please do. And Gwyneth, I know, is monitoring that, and we'll collate questions of a similar nature so that we can coordinate that part of the conversation a bit more succinctly. In terms,
Mike, you've just muted yourself.
Not a great start. Well, it all depends really whether you're listening or whether it's me trying to talk. The old adage, as I was saying, that you can't manage what you don't measure, applies as much to energy efficiency, energy management, as it does anything, and is absolutely true. If we're not tracking and understanding what energy we're using at what times of day, when, where, and how, it makes it very difficult to actually manage that energy, and certainly to evidence the impact of any measures you're taking to try and manage that energy. Observing peaks and troughs in your consumption can help identify areas where you might be wasting or minimising energy waste. So identifying flows. Now, often to be able to do that, you need half-hourly energy data, you need complex energy data to be able to really understand it. But I'm not going to get bogged down in the complexities of the technical. What I really want to talk about is just observing trends. So this will relate to if you're not currently monitoring and targeting, just taking monthly meter readings, weekly meter readings, and plotting what that consumption, what that data is telling you, to see if your patterns in consumption are going up or down, so that you can hopefully try and pinpoint that within your business operations as to the reasoning behind it. So everybody's in the office one day of the week, there's a surge in the amount of energy that's being used. You can relate that to the fact that you've got more people in the office. But if you've got a day where very few people are in the office and that consumption doesn't drop, then that perhaps gives us a sign that there's some opportunities that can be looked at in terms of reducing any waste that there might be. From our perspective, it's really important that you've got a year's worth of energy data behind you, if for no other reason that you've got a baseline against which to measure the impact of anything that you are seeking to do. And I think it's also really important that not only having that baseline and then being able to compare it to your current day patterns of consumption is important, not only from a communications perspective with your staff, with your customers, with your suppliers, whoever you're working with on your sustainability, but also it'll significantly support any funding applications that you'd look to go for as well, because you're already demonstrating and proving to the potential grant provider that you're serious about energy efficiency, about sustainability, about reducing your emissions, and so committed to it are you that you are monitoring and tracking the consumption that you've got, so that you can actually provide information about how much energy you're using and what the opportunity is for savings to be achieved. Speaking of savings, setting a reduction target, typically, I would say, and hopefully Dave will endorse later, setting a first-year target, if you've done nothing before, of 10 to 15% is usually very achievable. And that, I think, would be very achievable by introducing no-cost measures and low-cost measures, such as positive behaviour change as a no-cost measure, time control or loft insulation or low-energy lighting as a low-cost measure. Dave will cover all of this in a lot more detail a bit later. But some of these things can have a very significant effect. And I think it's more than reasonable to expect that you could achieve a 15% reduction, a 10 to 15% reduction through those activities alone. Hence the importance of monitoring and targeting to be able to evidence and demonstrate exactly what it is you've achieved. I'll look to cover this a little bit more a bit later in terms of some of the support services that are available to assist you with anything that you hear in this presentation that's of interest. And you'll also find at the very end from my presentation, there's a QR code that you can scan to link through to an inquiry form, should you want to follow up anything directly with me or any members of the team. Now, apologies for just throwing very uninteresting data sets at you. You can ignore them entirely. What I'm seeking to show you really is just trends and patterns. And this is just one of our simple energy diaries that are produced that basically helps you to identify by putting in your meter readings or your consumption, how much energy you are consuming in any given month, converting it into a monetary value, and also converting it into a value of CO2. Now, in this example, we've got three tables for an electricity day rate, and three tables that show electricity day rates, electricity night rates, and then the combined total of all of those. Now, again, I'm not getting hung up on the detail here, but in the tables that I've just highlighted at the top, it's a simple spreadsheet whereby we can input data like carbon conversion factors or unit rates for energy, so that all somebody needs to do is enter in, quite literally, the meter readings. And by doing that, we then automatically convert all of the information to give you data with which to make management decisions as to what you want to do, what you want to pursue, and how you want to go about doing that. Now, this is the case for electricity. And it's exactly the same for gas, or even possibly even simpler for gas, because you literally just enter in the meter reading once a month. We would assist you on all of the more complex conversion factors, putting in unit rates and again carbon conversion factors, so that you get the information that provides you with data on kilowatt hours consumption, costs, and tons of CO2 that are consumed. Don't worry that this may look complicated. I've literally just brought together 3 or 4 pages from workbooks and just pulled them all into one place so that it's visible on one page. So you don't need to be too alarmed by that. But connected to the energy diaries that we produce, that Severn Wye also produce, you then get data, graphical data, representations of that consumption. And this is basically, for example, here, the two tables, the two graphs that we're looking at are showing just your consumption from the same month one year to the same month the next. And quite simply, from the two areas that I've circled, you can see that in the green graph, which is from 2019, the total consumption for this organisation was in the order of 47,000 kilowatt hours. And then the same month the following year, that's reduced to maybe 41,000 kilowatt hours, which is obviously showing that 10, 15, 20% reduction, which is a bit of a relief because it was following a programme of in no cost and low cost measures and positive behaviour change that this came about. Similarly, on the two graphs on the right hand side, it converts the information into CO2. So we're able to look at the carbon impacts. And again, seeing that in January 2019, this organisation was looking at almost 15 tonnes emitted of carbon, whereas in the same month of the following year, that was down to just touching 12 tonnes of CO2. So again, it just helps to provide information to a management team, helps to provide easy to interpret data graphically for staff, for customers, and actually helps to show your potential funders that whilst you haven't necessarily invested in high-end building management systems to track your energy consumption, you can use a relatively simple Excel spreadsheet in order to be able to glean the data, glean the information, and make some analysis and observations of it. The most important message within this, well, I suppose the second most important message within this is keep on top of it. The first is put it in place. So actually make sure that you've got some monitoring management systems in place that you can utilise, but then keep on top of them. We work with a local rugby club that participated in a positive behaviour change programme with all of their employees and achieved some fantastic results over the first sort of 6-9 months of working with them. You know, consumption was dropped by over a third, costs were dropped by around 25%, which was absolutely fantastic. The reason it isn't a third reduction in costs and consumption is that the organisation had a lower nighttime unit rate and more savings were made over that period of time, just for your information. But putting in place an energy diary meant that they continued monitoring their consumption and could track and evidence the savings that were being made from the programs that they were looking to implement. I mentioned things were going great for the first 6 to 9 months. At the 9-month point, it was found the consumption immediately jumped back to the pre-training levels, which got everyone scratching their heads. But through the energy diaries, we were able to see that it wasn't just a slow increase back up to the pre-training levels. It was an immediate hike. It was a complete jump straight back up. So we had conversations with the operations manager and their team to try and look at why this might be, and essentially managed to deduce that it's because the staff were seasonal employees. So those that we had trained 9 months earlier had all left and taken with them the training and knowledge that they gleaned to help keep consumption down and to apply their positive behaviour change learnings. And they were replaced by new staff who'd not received the training. That skill set was lost. So the consumption and the costs jumped straight back up again. But it was by having the energy diary that we were able to immediately identify that consumption and costs had increased. And it was by looking at the previous month's trends and patterns, we were able to say exactly when it happened and then apply a business rationale and reason behind why it happened. And it just made the whole process, it gave the business a lot of confidence that their systems were robust and that they had approaches in place to be able to track this. We hadn't understood that at the time. We thought delivering the training, great, that's all in place. What we didn't do was integrate it into ongoing induction of new staff. And that was a key learning from that we were able to apply, which was really valuable. I know I'm coming to the end of my time talking about some of this now, and sadly, I think you can tell I would like to talk about this forever. But you'll be relieved you don't have to listen to me talk to it about it forever. I wanted to touch on understanding, making sure that you're understanding your energy bills. There are similarities and differences to the domestic energy bill from the commercial energy bill, but there really are just a couple of things I wanted to say. When you're paying your bills, you're not just paying for the consumption. You're often paying for additional features, additional services, be it the standing charges that you're paying as a part of your domestic bill or commercial bill, or even more complex charges like having the availability of a certain amount of energy in place for you to use as and when you want to. But first and foremost, the important thing is, are you in or out of contract? Now, this isn't looking so much directly at net zero and emission reductions, but it's looking at the cost savings that are imperative that go alongside this to help you make important business decisions to further invest in sustainability and energy efficiency, which is why I think it's important to actually look at the financial aspect of this. Often we found if you're out of contract on your energy bills, you can be paying more than double on your unit rates than you would be if you were in contract. Often you won't hear that you're coming out of contract, and it will just happen automatically. So it's the responsibility and onus is on you to stay on top of your energy supplies and suppliers to make sure that you don't go out of contract. If you're using your bills to put data into your energy diaries or whatever system you have for monitoring and recording, make sure they're actual rather than estimated. If you've got estimated readings, it's almost as valuable as not doing it at all, because you're not getting any useful information about the amount of consumption that you're using. So make sure you verify your meter readings on your bills with the meter if you're able to, so that you can actually make sure that you've got actual meter readings. For those of us that have smart meters installed, make sure you're engaging with your supplier to download the graphical representation of your consumption so that you can see the trends in what you're using. If you do have this service available, your data can be provided to you with half-hourly consumption, not just monthly consumption. So you can see on a very granular level what you're doing and when. And also, if you want to try things by switching things off for just one evening, you can use your smart meter to track the impact of that against your previous consumption. I mentioned that there are other charges that you get beyond just your unit rate. And with your electricity bill on a monthly commercial energy tariff, you might be paying for something called available supply capacity. Now, this is basically the energy company guaranteeing you a certain amount of energy available for you to be able to use. So it's nothing to do with what you actually use. It's just saying it's available for you to use. But for that, you pay a premium. It's possible to work, we can work with you through our energy action group to identify if you're ever using that volume of energy. And as such, work with the suppliers to reduce that level so you're paying an awful lot less. And these can be quite sizable sums of money that you could then look to reinvest in your emerging energy efficiency measures that you want to install, be it lighting, be it insulation, against which you can make further savings and continue that cycle. So mentioning this, you sort of may be thinking, well, some of this might be of interest to me. I would be keen to find out more about what's going on. We are looking to work through Social Business Wales, funded by Welsh Government, a programme called Net Zero Services that I'm heading up at the moment. And we're looking to work with social enterprises specifically, particularly pioneering. Now, that might mean social enterprises either working in the field of climate change or social enterprises with a commitment to really wanting to eliminate their emissions, if you like. So one of our services is to work with pioneering enterprises. I'm about to, on the next screen, bring up a QR code that will link you through to an inquiry form if you're interested in participating. Please either just say, yes, let me know more in the chat, or click through the QR code and complete the form to give me a little bit of information, and I can come back to you. But then we've also have our Egin service that Gwyneth was talking about earlier on for community groups and organisations to benefit from, against which they get the expert specialist support from Dave and his team at Severn Wye, who can conduct energy surveys for you, which are truly excellent in terms of the information they provide and the clarity of that information as well. So if you're able and eligible to access that Egin service, I urge you to. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And finally, the Energy Action Group that we have, which offers a brokering support service to make sure that you're on as competitive an energy tariff as you can be on. It can integrate monitoring and targeting to help you with your improved management if you haven't got the time to focus on all of this activity, but it's something you want to know. You've got the peace of mind of experts taking that on board for you and your organisation. I mentioned eligibility for these programs is different, but if you're a social enterprise or a community group or an SME, then we can probably help you. This was everything that I wanted to say. I'm just going to leave this up just for 20 seconds so that those of you that are remotely interested can grab your cameras and just scan that QR code, which links through to our inquiry form and eligibility form for further support, or just take a screenshot, I suppose, of the screen on your computers, and you've got everything there and ready for you. That was a whistle-stop tour of the importance behind measuring, monitoring, and targeting. I hope that it didn't go too quickly. I hope there was something of value and of interest to you there. And if there's any more we can talk through in the questions shortly, but for now, I'll just hand back to Gwyneth.
All right, thank you, Mike. Well, I'll just I'll pass to Dave really, because yeah, we'll take the questions at the end, but I can see in the chat a lot of people are putting their email addresses there so that you can yeah, get in touch or send more information. We'll save the chat as well so that we'll have all of that. And yes, if you have questions for Mike or Dave, just please write them in the chat and then we'll try and get around to addressing them afterwards. But I'll pass to Dave now so that you can move into your presentation.
Thanks very much, Gwyneth, and yeah, thanks for that, Mike. Yeah, really important message about monitoring and measuring, because how do you know what you're doing wrong, or if there's a problem, until you've actually understood what your usage is. So I'm just sharing my screen. Fab. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that now. My name's Dave Gittins, Director for Wales at Severn Wye. I'm going to talk a bit about energy efficiency in community buildings. This is going to be a broad brush approach. I'm not going to give you the silver bullet for your specific community building, but I'm going to give you hopefully some useful tips that will pique your interest and hopefully set you on a journey to actually reducing some of your energy use and carbon footprint. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is we don't have to have renewable energy on our buildings. When groups come together and think about energy efficiency on their building, one of the first things they do is we need solar panels. And whilst I'm not saying don't get solar panels, if every community group had solar panels, that would be a fantastic thing. It's not the only thing you should do, and it's not the first thing you should do. The phrase I've got up there is the cheapest unit of energy is the one you never use. So let's focus on how to reduce the energy we use before we start looking at generating in our own. And there's lots of positive action you can take to reduce your carbon footprint, which will reduce your running costs of the building, and you don't need to have renewables to do that. And I appreciate Rhiannon Williams said in the chat about she got a rugby club and she's looking at solar panels and new boilers, which is fantastic. But I'll move on to my next slide, which talks about the energy hierarchy and the importance of tackling things in a certain order to maximize the benefits you'll get. So the energy hierarchy gives you a way to understand where to take action first, where to spend your money first to get the biggest bang for your buck, to save the most amount of carbon, reduce your bills the most, and yeah, to start with, minimize the energy demand. So the start of that is just stop doing things. So identify where you're wasting energy and stop it happening. So simple things like turning the lights off, Behaviour change in general is a really good exercise to do. Things like efficient use of community buildings, so we're not just using them for 1 hour every night and then heating them for that 1 hour. If you can combine that use so they're sequential, we're only heating the building, and once it's warm, it will stay warm for a couple of hours. Mike talked about doing some work with rugby clubs. We've also done some work with rugby clubs. And one of the interesting things we found with one club was they had their fridges keeping the drinks cool 24/7. They're only selling beer on a Friday and Saturday night, but they ran it every day of the year, the fridges. So just things like putting timers on, so those fridges would come on and cool down to temperature for the Friday night, was a game changer for them. So it's a really simple thing. And again, one of the biggest things you can do is monitor your energy use so you understand what's happening. The next thing you can do is maximize your energy efficiency. So that's looking at making sure you have the most energy efficient buildings you can do, and all the things in those buildings, such as the appliances, are all as efficient as they can be. The third step is around low carbon energy. So that is getting solar panels and generating your own renewable energy. And the last thing you can do is offset. So for everything that you still create carbon for, that you can't stop doing, you can offset and find a way of making that journey to net zero. So one of the approaches we have when we look at community buildings and energy efficiency is one called Fabric First. And hopefully the diagram here is a useful concept when it comes to energy efficiency. So here we've got a bucket that's leaking, and the best way to ensure that bucket's full is not to pour water in it more quickly, but it's to stop the leak. And it's the same with the community building. The best thing you can do is not put in more powerful heating, more, great, supplementary heating, so having electric and gas boilers. All that will do is increase your spend and increase your carbon footprint. The best thing you can do is invest in the insulation to make sure that that building stays warm with whatever heat you put into it. So number one is make sure the fabric of the building is sound. So don't fit insulation if your roof leaks, because the water will mean that insulation doesn't work. So focus on getting a building that is in usable condition to start with, and then start looking at the energy efficiency measures you can make before you spend money on renewable energy. Because ultimately, it doesn't matter how much heat you put into an inefficient building, it keeps leaking. One of the other things is that insulating a wall isn't exciting. It's not even visible. And having solar panels on your roof looks great, but actually getting the basics right and keeping your building warm and efficient is far more important, even if it's not visible. So a few quick energy saving tips. Where you have temperature controls in your community building, if comfort allows, turning things down by 1 degree gives significant savings. And also fitting remote controls, so you can turn the heating on and off remotely, so you don't need to have someone in person, means things are less likely to be left on by users. And having sensors and timers make sure that you're only using energy and heat when you need it. I touched earlier about the efficient use of buildings. So if you can get sequential use of a building, it's far more efficient than having one group use the building each night for an hour, because you've got that leading time of heating it, and then once the building's heated, that heating is lost. One of the cheapest and most effective things you can do around energy efficiency is to upgrade your lighting to LEDs. First of all, it's not that expensive to do. Generally, it improves the quality of the lighting in the building, and also the payback period is very short because LED lighting is far more efficient than old incandescent bulbs. And again, I'm going to echo what Mike said, measure everything. You can't control something unless you measure it. And also having those graphs where you can see whether your usage is going up or down. One of the really good things is if there is a fault with an appliance, or something is leaking, or your your toilets are now, the urinals are flushing every 10 minutes instead of every hour. You'll spot things like this because usage will spike and you'll be able to question why that is. So I'm going to move on to a couple of examples of village halls we've worked on in the past and done energy surveys. So Horsley Village Hall was built in 1962. It's a relatively modern hall in the scheme of halls based across Wales. And they had a survey, and there were a few no-cost and low-cost measures. So looking at where the less used areas were in the building was turning down radiator temperatures. So you weren't heating storerooms to the same temperatures you're heating the main room of the building, and also installing a smart meter which allowed them for that half-hourly data. As far as capital measures that were recommended, installing more loft insulation was number one. Cavity wall insulation, the building was lucky enough to have a cavity, but it was uninsulated, so that was insulated. Recommended LED lighting as well, and new boiling and controls, and more double glazing where it hadn't been upgraded. And I've just added in that comment there that the group were already focused on, as they put it, a green ethos, so saving money, avoiding waste, and they'd started setting aside funds for improvements. But actually having the report gave them the impetus and focus to then start upgrading the building. And on the top right hand side of your screen, they invested 6,750 in those capital measures, and that gave them, when installed, a saving of £921 a year, which is a reasonably quick payback period, and was also saving them 2.6 tonnes of CO2 every year. And in our village hall, this was a lot older one, built in the 1800s. Low cost and no cost measures was, first one was around optimizing that usage of the hall, so we could have multiple users at weekends and if possible at nights, and installing that smart meter so they could measure all that use and understand where their energy was going. As part of the capital measures recommended, they insulated the roof space, which hadn't been done previously. They installed an air source heat pump, and they upgraded their LED lighting. That increased the comfort in the building. People found it a lot more warm and cozy. They made a comment about they thought the heat pump might be noisy, but for things like yoga, you obviously don't want a load of noise in the background, but they said it was no problem at all. One of the other things they flagged up was once they installed those measures as well, the damp problems that they thought was just part and parcel of having an old building, which led to things like curtains going mouldy and having to be replaced and walls repainted. They eradicated those issues because the building was staying warmer and reaching a more acceptable temperature. And again, the stats for this one, they spent 7,600 improving the hall, making it more energy efficient, which returned a saving of £1,600 a year and 5.8 tonnes of CO2. So when to take action? One of the really important things, and we'll keep coming back to it, is measure your energy use so you know whether it's going up or whether it's going down. If you install LED lighting, you'll be able to see whether your energy goes up or down. You'll be able to see what the payback is of those things. Understanding your energy use and carbon footprint is really important. So getting that baseline from your data before you take action will help you see the journey you're taking. I really recommend having an energy audit on your building. And obviously we do energy audits. That's one of the things we do as a charity. But this is offered through Egin to groups that are eligible for support. So I'm not here to sell my services. I'm here to promote what Egin are doing. That energy audit will provide you with really detailed information about the low cost and no cost measures you can take. And it will also look at the short-term, medium-term and long-term capital measures you can invest as well. Also, it will look at a year of data where you have it for your building. So all those calculations and graphs that Mike showed. If that intimidates you, that's included as part of the survey. You can look at that. So yeah, that's really what I've got to say. There is the Egin community, the Egin online community and website, where you can go and have a look at what support's available. You can get in contact and say, I'd like some support, and then they can see if you're eligible for that support. And yeah, really that's all I've got to say. So I think we can take some questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Dave. Fantastic. So let me just remove the spotlight off you for a moment. And we were also hoping to hear a little bit from, communities who've been through this procedure of having energy audits and making some changes. We weren't able to get hold of any of the groups we wanted to, but Louisa, were you happy to give a little story from your community work?
In my previous life, probably about 10 years ago, I was, some of you might know me, I was involved in the development of a brand new building. Now the building is slightly different to some of you who perhaps might be taking on old buildings and updating it. But this building was brand new, met BREEAM standards, and, excuse me a minute, sorry.
Okay, we'll come back to that story. In the meantime, I'm just going to encourage people to type in the chat if you have any questions. Yeah, carry on.
Sorry, I had a visit from the dog then. Apologies. Right, so yeah, I was working in a place called Glencoch, and we set about to develop a £1 million building, which was, ultimate aim was to reach BREEAM standards. Now, one of the key things with the building, we had air source heat pumps. It was a very large building with a tall ceiling. We had underfloor heating. We had solar panels. We had rainwater harvesting. And one of the it was a fantastic building. When we were up and running, within the first year, we identified we had all these different energy efficiency savings, but our electricity bill, it was all run on electricity, was £8,000 per year. Now, the whole design was to minimise the cost incurred by the community. However, it was highly energy efficient. However, what really became apparent was that there was only a few people that were trained up in understanding the technology. Now, the technology was excellent. So we had power places where we were able to monitor the efficiency of our air source heat pumps. We had the measures in terms of our energy generated from our solar panels. We didn't have any water bills, and we had minimal electricity use in order to heat our water. However, within the first year, we incurred £8,000 a cost, and for a community group that run voluntary, actually that was quite significant. What became apparent was we needed to monitor the use of the air source heating in terms of heating the large hall that we had with the underfloor heating. So what was happening was some of the volunteers were turning on the underfloor heating when they went in, and sometimes it would take about 4 or 5 hours from, not so much 4 or 5 hours, 2 hours for it to warm up, and then another hour then for it to be cozy enough for people to use it. So what was happening was then they started to leave it on. And of course, this incurred significant cost then because they were keeping it on. And then when it got too hot, warm in there, our windows were automatic, and the carbon emissions had risen. So all the windows would open up, and then all the heat would go out to the windows because the carbon in the air caused the windows to open because it was so warm in there. So what had to happen was we had to review and look at the amount of electricity we were using, and try to train the volunteers up. Now, one of the biggest issues which Mike has highlighted in his example with the rugby club was the importance of training volunteers up, and lots of people in the management of all the energy efficiency. It was state of the art. We weren't used to having any of those that sort of technology. and it really cost the organisation. It should have been really energy efficient. The building should have been really sustainable, but £8,000 electricity cost, which is quite reasonable, but the ultimate aim was it should have been about 4 or 5. Within a year, we had reduced that to 5,000, and we were also making about £3,000 from selling back to the grid. We didn't have batteries at the time. Biggest lesson learned is to ensure that everybody, and you've got a continuous rolling induction so that people have the knowledge and understanding to manage the equipment. The other thing that's really important is actually ensuring the volunteers have buy-in and understanding, because often some of the volunteers would go down perhaps to clean up and they would put the heating on without any recognition of the cost and its impact. Brilliant building, but those were some of the difficulties in terms of running a real energy efficiency building and new technology. So that's my story, guys.
It's a really interesting one, Louisa, and thank you for it. I mean, I know we talked about this before, and it can be very difficult, particularly if you're looking at things with underfloor heating, as I'm sure Dave will agree, when you're trying to anticipate when the heat's going to be needed, and you need to actually make sure it's coming on ahead of the actual point of time that is actually required. In the same way that you wanted to turn off an hour or 2 hours, or however efficiently the building works to retain the heat, you wanted to turn off that period of time before the end of its required use, because the residual heat will keep you warm, and just before all the windows open to let all the heat out, because they've been automatically set and to work in conjunction with just using the heat that's required and keeping the building within those heat parameters. But the last thing you want to do is to have the heating just on ad infinitum. And I think in this instance, we were also talking about the fact that the technology was really, really good in terms of the heat pump technology, in terms of the solar panels that were brought in. But because the building was a pitched roof, the one thing that could have been done to support better efficiency would have been, and I know Dave knows exactly what I'm about to say, would have been the installation of your destratification fans. Because at the end of the day, as we know, warm air goes up, it rises. And if you're in a really, really efficient building with lots of insulation, that warm air is just going to store in that unused sort of loft area that you have. With a destratification fan, it just basically brings the warm air down to the point where it's actually going to be used and where it is useful. And as you say, you've managed to achieve in year 2 the extra £3,000 savings from bringing your bill down from 8 to 5 or 4 or whatever it was you said. But a destratification fan at a cost of something like £70 plus labour would have ultimately achieved that almost instantaneously by driving the heat down to the useful level, ensuring the heat pumps weren't working harder than they needed to provide the heat that was needed. And this is where, and I'm just basically endorsing Severn Wye and Dave and his team at the moment, this is where that independent eyes-on survey comes into place, because it's about understanding the flow of heat, the flow of water, and how it all works, and the things you need to be mindful of. And these guys know that if you're in an area with a large unused roof area, you need to try to prevent the heat from being just stored there unnecessarily. But those of us that are just using the buildings for other reasons, for the purpose of delivering our community services, we have no requirement or expectation that we should necessarily know that. Which is why the availability of these services and spreading the word about them, that they are available, is so important. So thank you, Louisa. I thought that was a really, really interesting example that you gave.
Thank you. So I want to ask, does anybody want to ask a question? There are a couple of things in the chat, but if anyone wants to just raise their hand and ask anything. And it can be a general question, or it could be a little bit more specific about your own community building. Obviously, as much as we can answer without seeing it.
Hi, Rhian Williams. I work for the Dre of Werth, but I also work, I'm the secretary of the rugby club in Blaenau Festiniog. Our usage is 30,000 kilowatts a year, and I'm in desperate need of getting someone to explain to the staff and everything there, what can we turn off? Fridges, freezers, fans for the cellar, etc., etc. Yeah, help.
I mean, from our perspective, we need to just basically see how the club is constituted to understand basically which service is available in terms of what's eligible and what isn't. And I think Dave will probably have some similar things to say again. For me, it's about out of hours energy use. Particularly in rugby clubs and buildings like that, you've got a lot of cellar services, you've got a lot of refrigeration that you've got on. A lot of it's unnecessary refrigeration. What I mean by that is people like to have cold drinks. I'm not trying to stop that, but when people have gone home at midnight and they're not coming back till Wednesday for training again, or whatever it might be, do we need to have the refrigerating tin drinks for that 3-day period, when actually on a time switch, 7-day time switch, it can be set just to come on 3 hours, 2 hours, whatever works before the Wednesday night training session or the Saturday afternoon social entertainment before the games. Having it come on then, so you're basically just cooling what you require at the times you need to require. Now, I'm not talking about perishables. Perishables need constant refrigeration, of course, but the refrigeration of things that just don't need to be refrigerated permanently 24 hours a day is often quite a significant cost. Don't know, there'll probably be quite a bit of external lighting, security lighting, possibly even pitch lighting, don't know. Again, looking at the types of lighting that you've got in place there is going to be really important, and how it's managed and controlled. If you've got traditional lighting, you need to turn those lights on, external lighting, a couple of hours before a game starts if it's needed in the winter months, and you can't turn them off again because they won't come back on instantaneously. You need possibly an upgrade in your lights. Sorry, I'm stealing your thunder here. I'll shut up and let you.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, absolutely. Everything that Mike has said there, really relevant. Those timers that Mike's talking about, they're really cheap. You know, you can go to Argos, you can go on Amazon and buy those. And that's something you can do this week that would make a huge difference, because then those chillers aren't working for 50% of the time they're on. Looking at things like windows and doors, are they double glazed? Do they have seals around them? Do they fit? Can you see daylight? You'd be amazed the amount of community buildings that you can just stand and look at the daylight around a door, and if you can see the daylight, the heat is going out of that gap. So that makes a massive difference. Insulation, lots of buildings, you know, they're built and then they're left, and that's it. So if they were built 50 years ago, 70 years ago, they've never been upgraded, and insulation is relatively cheap. Provided you aren't in a conservation area or it's not a listed building, you can make those alterations, and it makes a massive difference because you just don't have to run your heating as much. I think you mentioned, Rhiannon, in your message that you've got some SPF funding for boilers and solar panels. So replacing the boilers is great, but being able to see the rest of the heating system and how you heat the spaces you have. Again, without being there, we don't know if you've got a big hall, small rooms, bar area, but it might be more efficient to have air handling units to get that heat in quickly. But yeah, there's lots of things, and then on top of that is the behaviour change. So helping your staff understand how those new boilers work. If the controls are different, how do they control them effectively? You know, when can we have it so that someone can turn the heating on and off remotely, so we make sure it's not been left on and they can monitor that. And again, it comes back to using looking at your bills and measuring them, so you can see what's taken effect. So you can put those timers on your fridges next week and then see what the difference is, monitoring it on a weekly, daily basis.
Thank you. I just want to jump in and say, I believe Rhiann's come to Egin already for some support, so hopefully that will lead you to maybe one of these energy audits that Dave's been talking about. And yeah, I wanted to just come back briefly to what help is available. At least there's a lot of help available, but what we're focusing on specifically today. So Mike, would you be okay just to give a minute or so talking about what is the Net Zero Services Programme now and the Energy Action Group, just so people have a clear idea of how they could be helped?
I will certainly try. I mean, in brief, Net Zero Services, funded through Welsh Government, delivered by Social Business Wales, is a programme of support available to social enterprises, be them startup or established, seeking basically advice and support to progress their net zero journeys, for want of a better word. By contacting Social Business Wales, you will be able to identify or gain access to business consultants that can provide support over the phone directly. But in addition to that, what we are looking to do is to set up really several other connected services. As I mentioned, one is a pioneering service or a service looking to work with pioneering social enterprises wanting to make a difference to what they're doing and how they're doing it. And that might be under us providing surveys, conducting monitoring and targeting, providing support in accessing external grant funding, establishing policies, internal policy systems, management systems, whatever it might actually be, whatever the priority is. But we're looking for organisations that are prepared to make a commitment to investing up to 10 days of time with us, and we in turn will look to commit the same amount of time back into supporting you with that service. We're only able to work in this year up until June with 6 organisations. So it is an application-based process, which is why that QR code I posted connects through to that. But I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody interested. And I've noticed from the chat, Rhian, Alison, Tony have all sort of, and others have all said that they want to have further conversations. And between myself, Louisa, Angela, we will make sure that happens. Absolutely. Within that, we're also looking to establish some knowledge exchange platforms and have some knowledge exchange open days. So we're looking to invite organisations to come together to share experiences in a similar format to this, but with breakout rooms, breakout sessions focusing on specific areas of activity that will be informed by you, by your needs, by what you're looking for, what you're looking to achieve. And the knowledge exchange networks will basically be something that uses an online platform such as Hivebright or something like that, for example, whereby we will have a network of social enterprises all wanting to do and achieve the same sort of thing. And we'll bring in specialists and experts, peer mentors through the services provided both by DTA and the rest of the Social Business Wales team to provide support. The Energy Action Group is a different service connected purely to DTA Wales, and it would be remiss of me to say that Severn Wye don't have one too, because they do, and it's important to make sure that use us both. Pick whichever one you prefer is best. There's sort of no preferential treatment here, but the point of this is that we're able to have relationships with energy suppliers and brokers. And so we're able to often get a far better deal on your energy tariffs than you would be able to get going in isolation to a supplier on your own. Our brokers engage with 70, 80 different suppliers. There's even the potential of having cumulative purchasing. So bringing organisations together who have similar energy demands and being able to purchase collectively, although the demand levels need to be very high for that to be effectual. But either way, through that service, we can then connect you up to monitoring and targeting platforms. And outside of all of that, if you want nothing more than a simple energy diary that's been produced at Severn Wye, we're able to actually connect to that and probably get you access to it in some format to be able to sort of make things start. As I said, I put my email on the presentation. Might have been a mistake. I hope not. But feel free to use it and contact me with whatever inquiries you've got. If you've left an inquiry in the chat, one of us will contact you. We're out of the office for the best part of the rest of this week at different events and activities going on, so give us a week or so to come back to you, but we will do so. Hopefully that's covered everything that you asked me to.
Thank you so much, Mike. I've put your email address in the chat as well. I hope
Very
that's
kind.
okay. And yeah, I'll just very quickly talk about Egin as well, and I'll give Dave a moment to talk, say anything else you'd like to say about the energy audits. So Egin is yet another programme run by DTA Wales, and yeah, we match groups who want to tackle climate change or live more sustainably with peer mentors. So that could be up to 3 days of peer mentoring from somebody who's already done something similar in their own communities. And that can be 1 or 3 mentors based on the different needs you have. But also as part of that, you can have an energy audit from our partners, Severn Wye Energy Agency. And that's what we really wanted to highlight today, because it might not be as well known that that's something that's available through Egin, sort of in conjunction with the mentoring. So Dave, do you want to say anything else about the energy audits, what people could expect really if they had one?
Yeah, so the idea of the energy audits is an assessor will come to your building, talk with you about how you use the building currently, what your understanding is of energy efficiency, what you want to achieve, and then look at every aspect of that building, how it's used, what it's made of, the type of heating you've got, if you've got cooling, refrigeration, and then look at what potential there is to change the way the building's heated or it's insulated, and look at renewable energy where applicable after we've explored those other things, and then come up with a recommendations report. And that report will tell you all the things you can do right now that cost very little, that will make a difference and help you reduce your bills, reduce your carbon footprint, and then all the things that cost a bit of money but will reduce that running cost. And as part of that Egin report, we pulled together a funding leaflet as well. So there are lots of organisations out there that do offer funding for some of these measures. So it's not like you just have to put in whatever reserves you've got with your organisation. So at the end of that process, you've got a potential to find funding, a roadmap of where you should go to improve the energy efficiency of that building. And it's very clear guidance. So I appreciate most buildings are run by committees, so it's easy to debate which avenue you should go down, but this sets out, this will save you this much, and it will probably cost you this much. So it makes it very easy for a group to take action. And yeah, the Egin website, Egin online community is how you get involved in that.
Yeah, thank you. I think
it's probably also, sorry, Gwyneth, I was just going to say, it's probably also worth saying that if you're not eligible to access support through Egin in terms of the Severn Wye surveys that are available, you probably slap me down afterwards, Dave, but it might be well worth contacting Dave anyway to see if there are any other programs of support that are offered through Severn Wye that are available, or even if you're actually able to invest in having a survey undertaken through your own resources. The recommendations that are made, the no-cost, low-cost measures that are recommended will nearly always pay for themselves within a year in terms of the cost you're paying for the outlay of the survey in the first instance. Now, you need to have that conversation specifically, but don't just give up if you're not eligible through Egin, or we can't provide support to you through the Energy Action Group, or whatever it might be. Come to myself, come to Dave, and we'll be able to have a wider conversation with you around some of the services that might be available, or at least keep your details on file so that we can actually come back to you when there is something that works for you. Sorry, I hope that was all right, Dave.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to pick up on that comment, Mike works for Development Trust Association. I work for a charity. We're not doing this to get rich. We're doing this because we believe in climate change and community action. So where there is funding, we will always give you the best amount of funding, or the most appropriate funding we can to support you. And if there isn't funding, we will do something at a price that is affordable to you, because we want communities to take action on climate change. So yeah, do get in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I just want to be aware of time and say some people might have to run now, but also if we're okay to stay a couple more minutes. Yeah, I think maybe Alison's question would be an interesting one to pick up on. So there were some very important points going on about behavior change and, you know, how exactly is carbon accounted for and measured. But I think that might end up in a very long conversation as well, unless Mike or Dave have a very quick thing to say about it. But Alison had asked, is there also a toolkit for groups to do their own energy audits? I'm wondering what either of you would say to that.
That's a really interesting one. Personally, I would say there are people that have trained for many years to be able to undertake these surveys and audits. And whilst there are elements that you could certainly undertake yourself in terms of efficient lighting and trying to identify what the most efficient lighting there is out there, you still might want either support from an electrician or somebody who's going to be able to actually point you in the right direction for what you're looking for. I would strongly urge against delving around in your plant room and your boilers and with all the heat pumps and drives and all of motors and all of those sorts of things. Because if you don't know what you're looking at and you're not sure how it all operates, it's probably far best to let a professional get involved with all of that. So what I'm really driving at, I think, is the things like the energy diaries, the monitoring, the targeting, the communications, the aspirations, the policy setting, are all things that everybody ought to be getting involved with and trying to drive forward, because they're fundamental to the success of anything that you're doing. Hopefully you're picking up from what Dave and I are saying. This isn't about just installing technical measures. It's about understanding how they operate. Louisa's advocated that perfectly in her example of how it operates within a community building. So I think from that perspective, not trying to do anybody out of a job, but I would look at leaving energy sustainability from a technical perspective to the technical specialists that know what they're doing with that. With regards to the carbon reporting, that is a whole new webinar on its own. Essentially, all the quick response is there's something called the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which outlines greenhouse gas reporting as expected to government standards, that gives you access to advanced data sets for converting energy from certain areas, certain things into carbon. Now it'll do fuels, it'll do transport, it'll do waste, it'll do water, all of those sorts of things, no problem at all. The reason why it's a separate webinar on its own is because it isn't just about the energy you use within your building, it's about the power that was required to go into getting that energy to your building. So that's called from well to tank. So be it coming through the transmission lines and pylons or through the gas pipes, the amount of energy required to get it out the ground and to your door also has to be accounted for in many ways. I know there were comments around this as well in terms of embedded carbon, in terms of products and equipment that we're looking at as well that need to be taken into consideration. All of that said, there's a far simpler way, and by using those energy diaries, you can convert just the power that you're using within your building to carbon to give an indicative feel for the sort of levels of emissions that you have. And to be honest, if everybody did that, we'd be in a much healthier place than we are at the moment. So whilst it might not be perfection, it's certainly a great start for 10.
Thank you, Mike. Dave, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just to follow that up. There's lots of simple things you can do if you haven't got LED lights and it's a case of just going around and going, that is not an LED light, we can go and buy a light bulb and change it. That's a nice, easy, quick win. If you look around the seals on your windows and doors and see daylight, yes, those seals could be replaced, or you can look at getting new doors. If you stick your head in the loft and there's no insulation, getting someone to put that insulation in, that's great. As part of the service we provide for Egin, it's all quality assured. So we have one assessor come up with recommendations and a second assessor quality assures that to make sure that those recommendations are absolutely what that group needs. And I'm quite happy to say that quite often our assessors will argue over very small points as to which technology should be included in that report or which type of insulation or whatever. And they've had years of training. So what it means is the group get exactly what they need, but for someone that doesn't have experience in that, it would be very easy to say, oh, we should do this, and it's the wrong recommendation. And once you've spent your money, if it doesn't work, you can't ask for your money back if you just paid someone to install it. So the survey is something that should be carried out by a qualified expert.
And to back that up even further, I mean, we've seen examples previously whereby somebody thinks they know what they need to do, does it, and it actually makes things worse. You know, if you put the wrong sort of insulation into the wrong environment and you create cold bridging where you're actually joining up a cold area to a warm area, you can destroy your insulation and the properties of what was there even before. You can cause structural damage even by doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. Now, I was umming and ahhing whether to say that or not, because the last thing I want to do is to scare everybody into, oh my goodness, I'm not doing anything, because some of the things that Dave has said are eminently achievable and doable on a DIY basis without years of training and skills in how to change a light bulb. I'm sure there's a joke in there somewhere. But it's about the things that if you're not sure, don't mess around with it, because there's every chance you might not be helping the situation at the end of the day. So I just thought it was useful just to point that out. It's not just a question of trying something, if it doesn't work, oh well, because some things that you try could make things worse.
Thank you. Okay, fantastic. And then finally, Deborah was just asking about sort of what information is provided in these energy efficiency, audits. For example, quotes. Yes. Is that something, Dave, if you're able to just skim the question quickly and respond to that?
So yeah, the contents of that energy audit, you should be able to give that to an installer and get a quote based on them coming to look at your building and them looking at the recommendations, and provided they're quoting for what's in there, yeah, that will give you what's needed. As far as a structural survey on the roof, that isn't included in the report. Some solar installers will do that as part of the cost, but it's not included in our report. And every roof is different, so you can't just speculate on that, because we don't want the roof to fall in.
I think that's a really important point. You know, energy surveyors are energy surveyors. They're not necessarily structural engineers, although some are. It's the remit of ensuring that there's structural integrity of a building falls within the remit of the installer of the equipment, more so than perhaps the energy surveyor in that instance. The installer will have insurances taken out to make sure that, you know, if your roof falls in, that they're covered as a result of whatever the cause of that may have actually been. But it is really important for making sure, Deborah, that you ask them to make sure they've conducted that survey on the roof, the structural survey, to ensure the integrity of the roof as it stands. The elements that Dave or I might look at conducting is saying, well, your roof is X meters squared, you could fit X number of solar panels on. We could work out the calculations of energy generation and how much power you're going to generate and how much you might be able to use of that power to offset what you're currently using, how much you might store in batteries for exporting to somewhere else or using later in the day. But what we wouldn't do is be able to say, yeah, cram the panels on it, it'll be fine. And we wouldn't ever suggest that. So I think it's important just to make that point. But it's really important you've asked the question, and thank you for doing that, because it hopefully will make others think, rather than they just rely on the integrity of the survey. Some things aren't known if they're not said. I believe within Severn Wye's report, in very many areas, they do say you need to seek specialist expert advice with regards to things like installing heat pumps, installing solar panels and such like, but they would be able to guide you through that process. So you wouldn't be left alone. So once a survey's been out, once a report's been produced, you've got a point of contact you can go back to. I'm thinking of following this through. How do I do it? Now, there was another part to that conversation, which was around installers. And as Dave says, give the report to the installers, they'll come out, give you a quote, it should be good and everything, and if, you know, all being well, everything's fine. For me, I'd like to see a network of trusted installers established so that people can use local skills, local services. That's seeing any grant money that's coming in being invested for the benefit of you, for the measure that you're having, but also for the benefit of the local economy, for the skills and the local trades that are actually being able to benefit from it as well. I'm not sure we've necessarily got that in place for coverage throughout Wales, the whole, as yet. It will be an ambition of mine to be able to try to achieve that, so that we can achieve it. I know Severn Wye did have and may still have an installer network in place. And I don't know the coverage of it or the details of it, so I'm not going to talk to that, and I'll let Dave do that. But it is something we've both been working on previously, and know the importance of having those trusted installers and trusted people around to be able to help. Dave, did you want to?
Yeah, so we've got a link to Energy for Wales, which is a group of installers that we believe are trustworthy and will do a good job. It's very early days. There's only a small number on there, and it doesn't cover the length and breadth of Wales, but it's something that we're looking to increase in the future.
Thank you. Well, I know we've gone over time a bit now, so I'd like to just respect everyone's time and wrap up there. But I suppose get in touch with us. If you've put your email address in the chat, we'll get in touch with you. It might be Egin or the Net Zero Services Programme or the Energy Action Group, or maybe we can signpost you somewhere else to help you with whatever it is. So thank you so much, both Mike and Dave, for joining, and Louisa for sharing your story. Thank you everyone else for being here as well. And this, the slides, I'm sure we can organise sharing the slides if you've left your email, or you can email us and we'll send them over. And the video recording will also be on our Egin YouTube channel. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.